Hey friends, welcome to Springboot tutorial. In the previous video we have seen what is Spring Framework, then what is Springboot, and then what is Springboot architecture with example. And in this video we are going to see what is Springboot, what are the annotation which are most commonly used while developing the Springboot application. So one by one with practical we will see the annotation, what is the purpose and why to use this annotation in detail. And if you still not subscribed to my channel, then please subscribe and click on the bell icon so you will not going to miss my upcoming videos. I will bring this kind of interesting and helpful videos for you. So let's start without wasting time. The very first annotation is Springboot application. It is the most commonly asked question in interview as well. Whether you are fresher or whether you are experienced, it is most commonly asked question. Then the second most commonly asked question is the difference between path variable and request param. Then most commonly asked question is @qualifier. Then the difference between @controller and the REST controller. Then what is produces and the consumes. So one by one we will see each and individual annotation. So without wasting time, let's start for the Springboot application annotation. So Springboot application annotation, it is nothing but it is the combination of three annotation. The first annotation is @springboot configuration, then @enable auto configuration, and then @component scan. So let's see individually what the purpose of this annotation. The @springboot configuration is used to represent our Java class as a configuration class. As I told you in the previous video, Springboot is nothing but it is the submodule of the Spring framework where we have to create or we have to configure so many things in XML while creating Spring framework application. So in Springboot, with this annotation we can specify the class as the configuration class, so which is used to avoid the XML based configuration. Then the second annotation is @enable auto configuration. It is used to guess the components that are required to run our application. As we discussed in our previous video, that Springboot application or Springboot technology do most of the configuration by itself. So that is done by using this annotation @enable auto configuration. Practically we will see how to implement these annotations. Then the last annotation is @component scan. This annotation is used to scan for the classes to represent them as a Spring based class. And in the component scan, it takes one parameter, that is base packages. And in base packages, if we mention some package name, then that package name will consider as root package. And if we not mention any package name, then the current class package name will consider as root package. So let's see practically how to implement these three annotations. So here simply now what we will do is, I have ready project with me. You don't need to worry about how to create this Springboot application project. In upcoming videos I will tell you in details how to perform CRUD operation in Springboot using Springboot. So let's start with this. Now I will going to simply run this application using Springboot app, and in the application I have one API, that is test, which I have written in the REST controller. Let's see what will the output of this. So here you can see the Tomcat is started successfully. And if you don't know the Tomcat, what is the server, then watch my previous video. I explained these things detail in the previous video. So this application is started in the port number 9003. This 9003 port number I have mentioned in the properties file, the server port as 9003. So that's why this application runs on to the port 9003. Now let's come into the browser and let's see whether our application is working or not. So let's use localhost 9003 and then test. So here we are getting the output working fine, which we have written in this API. So it means our application is run and working successfully. So now let's see if instead of this Spring Boot application, if I mention these three annotation like so. First I will going to comment the Spring Boot application, then the very first annotation is Spring Boot configuration, then the second is Spring Boot @enable auto configuration, and the last one is @component scan. Now let's see the application is working or not. Now I will going to stop this first, and then I will going to rerun this application using Spring Boot app. So here the Spring Boot application is run successfully. Now let's see it is working or not by refreshing this API again. So we get the same response again. It means the application is working fine with these three annotation. Suppose if I mention, as I told, this component scan will take one parameter, that is base packages. In this we have to specify our current package name. Now this is my current package name, and I will going to specify this again. What I am going to do is I will make one more package with name com.test, and in that test package I am going to put my controller. And if you don't know what is controller, then in the upcoming videos I will tell you what is the controller. Now I have copied that controller in this com.test package, so now it is not part of my com.my project, because here you can see each and every package is sub package of this package, right? Here the controller, then exception, then model, repo and service, all are these are the sub packages of com.my project, and this I put into the other package. Now let's see the API is working or not properly. Now again I will rerun it as Spring Boot app. So the application is run successfully. Now I am going to refresh this page again. So here now I am getting status 404. It means the API is not working. It is not able to found that page. That's why we are getting 404. So now what I will going to do is, in the both package like com.test and com.cover, the com is common. So what I am going to do is I will just keep the com. Now both the packages are sub package of the com. Now I will again stop this, and I will again run this project as Spring Boot app. Now let's see the API is working or not. So here my Spring Boot app is run successfully on 9003. Now again I will going to refresh this API, and I am getting working fine as a response. It means my application is working fine. Now here we are going to know what is the purpose of this line. This basically is the run method, and which takes the two arguments. One is the current class, and second is the arguments which we passed in the command line. So let's see what is the implementation of this run method. This run method is calling one another method, then through this it is calling one more run method, and in this run method we will get like in the very first line it is stopwatch. It is nothing but it will keep eye on how much time the Spring Boot application took to run the application. Then at the end, if you see, it is returning one context, right? And in this context, if you will see, it is calling one method, that is create application context. And above this, if we see, there is one banner object. The purpose of this banner is like whenever your Spring Boot application run, and at that time at the start it prints something like this prim, right? So this printing is done by using this banner. Then this in this context it is calling one method create application context. So let's see what is the implementation of this method. So in this method it is using if then, like if our project is web based project, then it will going to load default web context class, and if it is normal project then it will load default context class only. So this will based on this web environment will based on the dependency which we are mentioning in our pom.xml file. So now moving ahead to the next annotation. Before that, I'll tell you like what is the purpose of this. The run method contains some logic which is used to bootstrap our application. For example, now if I comment this line and if I again try to run my Spring Boot application, let's see what happens. So here it is not showing anything because the Spring Boot is not started. Again I will save this, I will stop, and again if I will rerun this, then my Spring Boot application will get start normally. Here the Spring Boot is started normally. So let's move to the next annotation, component. So component is the annotation which used for general use class. Means sometimes we don't want other functionality, just making a class. At that time we can annotate that class with component. It means if we don't want to access the resources over the internet, at that time we can specify that class as component. So this marks a Java class as a bin so that component scanning mechanism of Spring can be picked up and pull it into application context. The next annotation is @controller. The @controller marked a class as Spring MVC controller. Then @service. It behaves just like @component annotation. It does not currently provide any additional behavior over the @component annotation. It is recommended to use @service annotation in the service layer classes. Then @repository. This annotation provides suitable need for DAO layer, which makes sure that unchecked exception will thrown in DAO layer eligible to be translating Spring data access exception. It means whenever we perform operation with Hibernate or with NoSQL data like MongoDB, at that time we are using third-party these databases, and they are made by each and individual vendor. So each vendor will have their own developer, and that developer will have their own way to write the code and to handle the exception. So this @repository makes sure that all these unchecked exception will able to throw and will able to handle the exceptions. So components is nothing but it is used to create the bin and makes it ready for dependency injection. So whatever the class annotated with component annotation, that will get ready into the IOC container of the Spring Boot application when we run the Spring application, and that we can use as dependency injection using autowired annotation. So let's move ahead. Let's see the user flow of the request. So here the user means anything that utilizing our API. Every time this user requesting, then the request goes to the controller, and controller will redirect this request to actual service based on some logic or based on some request parameter. And then this service will take the help of repository to get data from the database, and after that repository will get data from the database and give that data to the service, and service will run some business logic on it to convert that data into user requested form and pass it to the controller. Then controller will simply pass the data to the user. So this is the simple flow of the user request. So here all the characteristics of component will inherit in these three annotations. That means at the time of component scan, container will create the bins of 3 and it will be available for dependency injection with some additional feature. Moving ahead, the next annotation is @path variable. The path variable is used to extract the values from the URI path. It means it will use to retrieve the values from the URI like /force/id. So in this id, for example, from front end I am sending I want some employee data of some specific employee data, and I have that employee id. Suppose the employee id is 10, then I will going to hit that API like /employee/10. So to get that 10 id into the backend, into the Spring Boot, at that time we will use this path variable annotation. So this id and this id is same here, so that's why whatever the id we are passing to the front end, that id value will go directly into this parameter. For example, here is the URL localhost 8080 /abc. So this abc will directly go into this id parameter, and this id will be written as id:id, and the output we are getting like id:abc. The next is request param. This request param is used to retrieve query parameter, anything after question mark in the URL. So here you can see the URL is like /force, and the annotation is @request param string id. So whatever after this question mark we are sending, at that time that values we have to get, then that values we can get using request param. For example, from in the front end application, if we are using get request, at that time that request URL will going to make like this question mark id equals to abc. For example, there is name, then and operator name equals to abc. Then if there is pin code, then again and operator pin code equals to 1212, right, like this something. So to get these values we will use the @request param. So here this id value is abc, and we are getting that using this @request param string id. So the output will be id:abc, because we are returning that from here. So I hope you get this. These both are used to extract data from the URI. So next annotation is @autowired. This annotation in the Spring will look for a classes that matches the property in the application context and inject it automatically. So this annotation can be applied on variable, method, as well as on constructor. Here the main thing which we are going to see is @qualifier. So let's take this example. If you create an instance of a class implementing an interface, and there are multiple classes implementing that interface, what they mean is here we have two interface name and interface name. So this this same interface is implemented by two classes, my class 1 and my class 2. So at the time of autowired, when we specify the interface name, so at that time the conflict will happen, like whether it has to take this my class implementation or my class 2 implementation. So at that time we have to specify the name of the bin in @component. So here we are specifying like @bin name 1 and @bin name 2. So while injecting these classes, these objects, then at that time we are going to use @qualifier. In the @qualifier we have to specify the parameter name that we have mentioned in this component. So @qualifier is nothing but it is used to avoid the conflict in bins mapping, and we need to provide bin name that will be used for autowiring. So this way we can avoid issue where multiple bins are defined for same type. I hope you are getting. If you have any doubt about any annotation, then please ping me into the comment so that I will try to reach out to you. So moving ahead, we have next annotation @value. This @value annotation we will need while fetching the value from the property file. For example, in property files I have some keys and the value. In property file the data is consists in the form of key and the value. This one is key and this is its value. So let's see how we can use its value in our classes. So here I have written like @value, and in the curly braces I have mentioned the key of that property file, right? So this is the key whose value I want in this variable AWS access key. So simply the syntax for this is @value with in dollar in curly braces we have to specify the key. So we will need properties file to define the values that we want to inject with the @annotation. The next is @pin and @configuration. So let's see this annotation with practical. Suppose I go in one of my controller class. In there I have used @rest controller. Suppose I am using the @controller. At that time I have to specify each time whenever I will going to write the response, or I am going to give the response. At that time I have to specify @response body as well. So it is better to use, instead of this two annotation, @rest controller. So this rest controller is nothing but it is the combination of @controller and @response body. So it is better if I have 10 method and each method is giving some response. So each time I don't want to write the response body with each method. So it is better to use the rest controller, which marks a class as Spring MVC controller. The controller was introduced in 2.5 version, whereas rest controller was introduced in 4.0 version. Now we will see what is @pin and @configuration. So @bin is nothing but sometimes we want to make or to declare a single bin rather than letting Spring do it for us. It means, for example, in my configuration class, the configuration annotation is used to make the class as configuration class. So this configuration class can contain one or more bin defined inside. Here I define one dynamo mapper bin. It means the Spring will not create the object for me. I am telling Spring like create the object explicitly for me for this class DynamoDB mapper. For example, in most of the classes I have given annotation like @repository, or if it is service classes then @service. So whenever in the main package we have mentioned this Springboot application, so it is combination of three annotation, and in that the component scan, when it will scan this each and every package, so it will see whether the class is annotated with some annotation or not. If it is annotated, then it will going to create the object and it will store it into Spring IOC container. So whenever we want to use that, we are going to using autowire, and we are just mentioning the name of that class. So here we will save our time each time we don't want to create object like new and then dynamo mapper, right, like this. So here it will save our time that we are getting ready objects for our work. So the work of bin is to create the bin explicitly. So here we learn what is bin and what is configuration. Then the last is produces and consumes. The produces and the consumes is most commonly asked question in the interview. Most commonly, the consumes, or first we will check @produces. This specifies which meme, it means MIME, media type of the resource representing and sending it to client as a response. Means which response, which form of response, which media type resource we are sending to the client as a response, that we can give using @produces. Then consumes. This specifies which meme, that is media type of the resource representations are accepted or consumed by the server from the client. Sometimes we have to mention the response type like application/JSON, application/HTML or /text that we can mention using these annotations. So far we have learned each and every annotation. So let's have a quick revision of these annotations. The very first annotation is Springboot application, and this is combination of three annotation: @configuration, @enable auto configuration, and @component scan. Springboot configuration is used to represent our Java classes as a configuration class. That is, it is used to avoid the XML based configuration. @enable auto configuration, it is used to guess the component that are required to run our application. Then @component scan, which is used to scan for the classes to represent them as a Spring base. If no package is mentioned specified, then the current class package is taken as root package. Then we have seen the run method, which contains some logic which is used to bootstrap our Spring Boot application. Then we have seen the @component and @controller, then @service, @repository. In this, all the characters of @component will inherit in these three. That means at the time of component scan, container will create the pin of 3 and it will available for dependency injection with some additional feature. Then we have seen the user request flow. Here user means the anything that is utilizing our API. Every time user send the request, then the request goes to controller and the controller will redirect the request to actual service based on some logic or based on some request parameter, and their service will take the help of repository to get data from the database, and after that repository will get the data from database and give that data to service, and service will run some business logic on it to convert this data into user request form and pass to controller, and controller will pass this data to user. So this is simple user request flow. Then the path variable, it is used to extract data from URL, that is after this slash. We have seen the example as well. Then the request param, it is used to retrieve query parameters, anything after question mark in the URL. Both are used to extract data from URL. Then @autowire, in Spring it will look for a classes that matches the property in the application context and inject it automatically. This can be applied on variable method as well as on constructor. Then we have seen here @qualifier, it is used to avoid conflict in bins mapping, and we need to provide bin name that will be used for auto wiring. This way we can avoid issues where multiple bins are defined for same name. Then @value, we will need properties file to define the values we want to inject with the @value annotation. Then we have seen @bin, which is used to explicitly declare a single bin rather than letting Spring do it for us. Then @configuration, it contains one or more bin defined inside. Then @controller, it mark a class as Spring MVC controller, which was introduced in 2.5. And then @rest controller, it is combination of @controller and @response body. Then @produce, this specifies which meme, that is media access type of the resource representation and sent to client as a response. Then @response, @consumes, this specifies which meme, that is media type of the resource representation, are accepted or consumed by the server from client. Means it is used to produce the response, where it is used to consume the response. So to specify which type of data we are producing or we are consuming, that we can mention via these two parameters. So I tried to explain you each and individual component using practical as well. So I hope you now understood each and every annotation properly. So if you have any doubt or any query related to any annotation, then please feel free to comment in this video. I will try to reach out to you. And if you want this video in Hindi language, then ping me like that in the comment section. And don't forget to subscribe my channel if you like this video. That will boost my confidence and I will make this kind of helpful and interesting videos related to technologies for you. I am trying to explain you each and everything in very simple language so that you can understood that easily. And if you understood this, then please share this video with your friends so that they will also understood this, the purpose of this each and individual annotations, because I think that the knowledge increase by sharing. So please share this video as much as you can, help others also. I will bring new videos soon. Thank you.